Don't know if you can tell by the theming, but it's Poland today, red and white. Hey guys, it's model making time, and today we're looking at the TS-11 Iskra. We're actually looking at the Polish display team's version for Bialo-Czerwone Iskry. That means the red and white sparks. Suitable considering the aircraft is Iskra, which is sparks, so you can see how they got their name. It's Poland's sort of second display team. I guess the primary one was the Orlik team by the end, but I was very lucky to see the Iskra team, and we'll talk about my own personal experience with the Iskra team later on. But let's get into the actual video itself. So, of course, we're going to be talking about the history of the aircraft. We're also going to talk about the history of the display team, or the limited information I perhaps have on it. We'll look at the aircraft in gaming and where you can fly it, hopefully fly it, or maybe fly it soon. We're also going to be having a look at the history of the kit and decals as well, and then talk about my personal experience with the TS-11. So let's start with the history of the aircraft itself, shall we? So the aircraft was developed by PZL, one of the branches of PZL. So just to give some background, I know we've talked about the PZL P11, and my understanding is PZL, which stands for, let me say this really badly, Państwowe Zakłady Lotnicze State Aviation Works. I have no idea if I said that even vaguely correct. As it said, it was originally the State Aviation Works, which from what I can see was taken over by Heinkel during the Polish invasion before going back as a state aviation company. However, it split into several different, divisions, but they were separate companies really. And it would be those that sort of produced some of the most famous aircraft now known by PZL, such as the PZL-130 Orlik, but also what we're looking at today, the PZL TS-11 Iskra. The Iskra was built by PZL Mielec, which is now owned by Sikorsky, so a brand that I guess a lot of people across the world know, even if they didn't know PZL. They still manufacture some goods today, but it's its history that we're going to look at today with the PZL TS-11. Following World War II, Poland wanted to maintain its independence in the aviation sector, but it wasn't strictly that easy. As a member of the USSR, unwillingly, Poland had obligations to fulfill, and that included licensed producing aircraft. This included things like the MiG-17, for example. Poland had built some of its own aircraft, including the TS-8, which was a propeller trainer, but there was a need for a jet trainer, and following the death of Stalin, there was a lot more, freedom isn't really the right word, but freedom is what we're going to say. They had to develop their own jet trainer. The main designer of the aircraft was, and you'll forgive me if I say this really bad, but what? If I've said that bad, I'm sorry. Now you know where the TS comes from. That comes from his name, which is a really nice way for it to be represented, and reflects how German aviators often had theirs in. The aircraft would use a British engine, the Viper jet engine, but they couldn't really source it, or it became quite difficult to, so they used a Polish copy. This was the WSKHO10. And it's literally just like a Polish copy of it, and it's just because they couldn't supply it. Apparently there was an indigenous engine that was going to be available. It was in the advanced stages, but ultimately the first aircraft flew in February of 1960 using a Viper jet engine. In 1963 the first aircraft were produced. Hooray! They entered service as the Iskra Bis A model. Initially they used the WSK SO1, which was the indigenous Polish jet engine that we talked about earlier. This would be superseded in 1969 onwards, which would use the WSK SO3 model of the jet engine, which was a much more powerful version. The PZL TS-11 was originally going to be used as the Warsaw trainer, so it'd be used across the Warsaw Pact. So multiple USSR nations were using it. However, the L-29 was ultimately chosen. I couldn't really find the exact reasoning for this, but it essentially meant Poland was kind of in a bit of an odd position where they had a great jet trainer for themselves. And in the end, they exported it to someone that was not unfamiliar with using Russian or USSR aircraft, and that was India. In 1975, the initial batch of Iskra Ds were delivered to India, and this would be topped up in the 1990s with a further 26 aircraft. So it's not an unsubstantial order either. The Iskra lasted with India for quite some time, actually up until 2004. A total of 7 aircraft have been lost in that time, with the loss of 4 crew members. It would be in 1987 where production would end. A total of 424 aircraft have been produced. the reason for the closure of construction was purely lack of demand. There wasn't really anything for it. I mean, if you look across the world, we have a lot of jet trainers available at that time, including the newer models such as the BA Hawk. You also had the AMD and Dornier Alpha Jet. In Sweden you had the SK60, and that's not meant to mention the L29, and then later on you'd have the L39. So it was facing some stiff competition by the time production ended. December 2020, the Polish Iskra was replaced in service by the M346 Master of Elenia Aeromaki, or as it's now known as Leonardo. It was the end of an era for Polish aviation. No longer did they have their own jet, and it would also spell the end of the line of the Bialo-Czerwone Iskry, the Polish jet display team. They would keep flying for a little bit longer until the 22nd of August 2021, where they flew their last display. If you remember in my BA Hawk video, I talked about the use of sort of not really worthy jet trainers anymore that were kept around just for aerobatic display teams, and that included the Hawk T1 that we were talking about. And initially when I filmed that video, I thought the Iskry team was still going, and I was sort of heartbroken to know that actually they were now disbanded. So on that note, let's have a talk about Bialo-Czerwone Iskry, the Polish jet display team. So I genuinely couldn't find a lot of information about Bialo-Czerwone Iskry, and it's quite unfortunate. It might be that a lot of it's on Polish websites, so if you have any really fascinating links, please drop them in the comments below. I'd love to see more information about this jet display team, because all I could really find was not really that dissimilar to what was on their Wikipedia page or on sort of the main aerobatic display team websites. Originally formed in 1969, they flew 4 TS-11s under the name Rumbit. Between 1993 to 1998, they operated 9 pilots, which is quite a large jet display team. I mean, even teams like Patrulla Aguila don't fly with 9 pilots, so it's quite impressive, particularly when you think of the fact that by 1998, the Orlik team had also been formed, so Poland then had sort of 2 national aerobatic teams, which is quite rare really in the modern era. Historically, obviously, even squadrons had their own display teams, but most nations tend to have one jet display team, or one display team in general, I guess. I think the main 2 examples I can think of off the top of my head that have 2 are probably going to be Switzerland and America, so it is quite unusual. Oh, and the country that can't be named right now, for obvious reasons. Just a side note to this, I know a lot of other countries may have like helicopter display teams as well, which I know Poland also has, or had, not quite sure right now at the time of filming. But yeah, I'm more so on about sort of traditional fixed wing aircraft. And that's really it in terms of the history that I could find. I know the display team had performed internationally quite a lot, and they were one of the earlier Warsaw Pact display teams to deploy internationally, featuring at the International Air Tattoo. I know originally I was going to put the talking about my reason for the love of the Iskry team sort of a bit further back in the video, but I guess it flows on from where we are now. So back in 2016, I was going through quite a lot. It was early on into like all this, and I was just sort of coming to terms with the woman that I was going to be. I've been through I think 4 jobs or something within the space of a year to find something that was at least somewhat stable. And I was in a really unhappy relationship, quite an abusive relationship. And ultimately I decided, hey, let's go to Malta. Now, the person didn't really want to go with me, was really unhappy with me even putting makeup on. It was a really unhappy situation. But I went there because earlier in that year I went with my dad to Florence to see the Iskra team, and they were never there. When I was in Malta, I had a lot of life-changing experiences about finding out who I was, and although it would be 3 years before I ultimately left that situation, it was really the start of my journey, my route for happiness. Part of that was led by Iskra team and trying to see them live. I saw them in 2016 flying off the coast of Malta, where the airshow was at the time, I think it was from Smart City, and honestly it was amazing. They were one of the closing acts of the display, and I will never ever forget seeing them. It was honestly incredible. I was so happy. So I guess for me, although it might seem a bit random, that's why Bialo-Czerwone Iskry have such a massive place in my heart, because they really symbolised a lot in my life, like a big life event. So let's have a look at the TS-11 Iskra in gaming. Now, this is an interesting subject because it hasn't been available in lots of places, and there have been so many projects to make the TS-11 in different sort of areas. And I seem to remember there being one for CFS 3 at some point, but I couldn't find that, so we're just going to assume that that's not a thing. Traditionally, I would look at Flight Simulator, well, Microsoft Flight Simulator first of all, but I can't actually find this aircraft for that. So we'll be moving on. A new entry to the series is going to be DCS, Digital Combat Simulator, and there is an Iskra sort of available for this, but not really. Now, the virtual Bialo-Czerwone Iskry use this model for their displays, and I've watched their virtual display team fly a few times, and honestly, they are stunning. They are slaying, they're killing it. And I'm so glad to see that this aircraft can be preserved digitally, and this display team can be preserved digitally. They look absolutely incredible, and you're seeing their footage now. Obviously, if you want to watch their full displays after this video, have a look in the description. Tell them I sent you. From having a look at this, from what I could see, I think I saw it in a comment somewhere, I think they use the MV339's flight model, which is another module for DCS. So the TS-11 isn't fully accurately realised in DCS at this time. However, I've also seen that there are other projects to develop the TS-11 as well in DCS. So it looks like there's a couple of projects ongoing right now. I couldn't find any links for it to be available to anyone though. So at the moment, I think you're sort of stuck looking at other people fly the TS-11 in DCS rather than being able to fly it yourself, which is a shame, but I understand, you know, people might not actually own the rights to models. They could be used from models from other abandoned projects or whatever, and they might not be able to release them, and that's fair enough. Genuinely don't know if I'm going to have footage of this at the time, so if I don't, you're going to be sat here looking at me. So another game I found the aircraft was Strike Fighters 2. This is an older game from 2008, so it's well over a decade old at this point, but that doesn't mean it's bad. War Thunder is also that old, but I think this one doesn't have the same sort of updates as War Thunder does, sadly. This is a free-man model that I could see available for Strike Fighters 2, and you just add it like any other mod. I don't know how great it is. I don't really want to comment unless I manage to end up flying it, so that's really the only mention I can put of it here. IL-2 1946 is a recurring game on this list, and it's another place you can fly the PZL TS-11 Iskra, featuring its own unique cockpit and probably a slightly modified flight model, but I couldn't see anything to suggest that it's either 100% accurate or it's not very accurate. This is a free modification for the game. The aircraft is free to download on SAS 1946. I think you just have to create an account and then you can download it. It took me a while to find this originally because I couldn't find it in any search engines because I think it's behind their account wall. So just make sure you make an account. I dropped the link in the description below. It looks amazing, and the footage you're getting here, as you can see from this creator, is just stunning. It looks so good in IL-2 1946. Because this game is so fantastic with modifications, you can use the Iskra in lots of different situations, including your own scenarios. So I really would recommend flying it in this if you have the chance. Okay, as is tradition, let's finish this off with War Thunder. The footage you're looking at here is by Bialo-Czerwone. This is a user model for the TS-11 or the Iskra in War Thunder, and it looks absolutely stunning. Honestly, it looks incredible. We looked at the PZL P11C in War Thunder before, and this is probably surpassing that in terms of how impressed I am. It's got an amazing looking cockpit. The flight model just looks incredible. The armament looks fantastic. It just looks absolutely incredible. There are some screenshots of it in the display team colours as well, and I'm really excited for this. Hopefully we'll get to fly it soon because I can't wait for this. There are rumours that there may be a Polish tech tree added to War Thunder at some point, or some sort of Eastern European tech tree added, because I mean Poland, oh my god, we'll talk about it one day, but Poland had a lot of projects for jet fighters, much like sort of Sweden did, which just never came to fruition. So for now, hopefully we'll get this one day as a user model that we can use in War Thunder. Who knows, maybe it'll even be added as a premium plane at one point. Well guys, you made it this far into the video, so please drop a subscribe. I release videos on Mondays, and that could be every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on my work life, but also on sort of how far along a model's got, because they take time, and that's just the nature of it. Hit a like as well if you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, and also leave a comment in the description below. what display team should I do next? I already have some in mind, so let's see if our ideas match up. Remember as well, I do live stream model building on Sundays at 4:30, or at least most Sundays. Anyway, enough of all that silliness, let's go on to the history of the kit and the decals we're going to be using today. So, there are some old TS-11s flying around. Okay, bad choice of wording. Some old kits that are floating around. I've seen some indigenous Polish model kits that are the TS-11, and they're quite rudimentary. They're early on into sort of that hobby developing. And up until today, really, you can still buy those more basic kits. And I actually built one of those originally. And, it's not good. Here's a picture of the one that I built. Now I built this probably, gosh, I was probably about 18, 19, so coming on to 12 years. And as you can tell, I didn't really have a lot of creative talent at the time, but I really wanted to build a display team that, you know, no one else builds, because that's just what I'm like. I really like building things that are outside of the norm and the comfort zone, because I like seeing all these beautiful things that are from elsewhere in the world. Now, obviously I didn't do a good job, but this kit was originally one of the TS-11 kits that you could buy. It doesn't really feature much in the way of the decals, and I think it was from plastic. Again, it's a Polish manufacturer, and they're quite cheap and cheerful kits, really. I think you can get them anywhere between £5 to £9, and I'm pretty sure you can still buy the Iskry team one on eBay quite a lot, and you'll see it at a lot of model shows as well. It's not really like a super bad kit, but compared to the one we're moving on today, it looks kind of a bit basic. The one we're looking at today was originally produced in 2015, I think, and that was from Arma Hobbies. Arma Hobbies were a bit of a surprise to me when I first found them out, and I found them out through this. Arma Hobbies were a manufacturer I didn't really know about, and they were only formed in 2013, or at least from what I could see. And so the PZL Iskra was one of their earlier kits, and I remember it having a huge fanfare when it arrived because it was a unique subject. There wasn't really a comparably modern kit that was available. So it was really interesting to see it come out, and today Arma Hobbies have flourished and built a lot of lovely subjects, particularly highlighting, you know, non-Western perspectives in aviation, which I think is great. The boxing I built, as you can see, is a bit worn, but it's the Iskra DF. I got this kit purely because it was at Scale Model World when I saw it. I think I got it from Wonderland Hobbies. Shout out to you guys. I got my kit for about £15, and that exactly 15, it was £14.99. And it came with photo etch parts because it was like the more advanced kit. From what I understand, Arma Hobbies sell like 3 versions. They sell like the basic bitch version, which is probably what I should have got, because there was no way in hell I was going to bother with the photo etch, let's be honest. And then you have like the intermediate set, which has like, you know, photo etch parts, and it's starting to look a bit more advanced. And then you have like the boss bitch set, which has, I think, 2 of the models in, all the photo etch, all the luxuries, all the whole shebang basically. I got mine purely because it was what was available at the time, and I already knew I wanted to build this because I'd already bought the decals. Now, the set I bought is this. This is by BS Model, and it's a very basic decal set. Now, I'm going to talk about the decals first because I don't really do an unboxing of them. I don't think I really did anything proper for them. So we're going to talk about the decals now, okay? The decals you buy come as one sheet, and they're fine. They come as a sort of relatively basic printout. They're what you would expect to have for anything that's printed by a smaller manufacturer, potentially even an individual cottage industry. I'm a huge fan of Decal's DEKL ''S. They're one of my favourite manufacturers of sort of aerobatic display team, the words escape me. Aerobatic display team liveries, there we go. And again, they come on their own printed stuff. They do have the ability to print white, which a lot of manufacturers don't due to cost, and that's fair enough. But again, like, they're not cut out, you have to cut them all out yourself or sand them down or whatever, and that's absolutely fine. I have no issue doing that. My main issue with this is kind of hard to explain, so let's see a picture of the Iskry team like livery. You can see here on the wings and on the tail section that they've got sort of a thinner red line that then goes into sort of white, and then it's a solid red colour, or white the other side, or what have you. This is why I have an issue with it, because they only supply you with the top set. You don't get a bottom set. And initially when I was building this, I thought, oh, from the pictures I can see it's not underneath, and then I looked again and yeah, it's exactly the same on the underside. I ultimately decided not to buy another set of decals because what is the point? Like, I'm not going to really see it. It's going to be sat on a shelf, so I'm not too fussed. I know it's like that, and that's absolutely fine by me. Yeah, I think it's just something you should be aware of when you're buying this, is it won't give you really a full set. You need to buy 2 sets, and I think I got mine for about £14, so it's going to cost you £28 to do the decals. And I can justify spending the cost of the kit in decals, but I can't justify spending double the cost of the kit on decals, particularly when the decals themselves actually aren't like super complex. You get a diagram of the plane up, you could probably make them, or even just use masking tape. It's quite intricate, which is why I personally opted to use the decals. Yeah, I think it's really worth highlighting. I think it's not really great of the manufacturer. I think they should supply both. But I get that there may be a cost perspective, but I'd rather you pay like an extra couple of pounds to have both sets than for you to charge like full price for decals which don't actually do a full aircraft. I think that's a bit unfair. But again, I try and support smaller businesses where I can in the modelling space, but I think that's really something people need to be aware of when you do buy them. Because honestly, I didn't even realise. I thought, oh, there'll be enough there. And there just wasn't, unfortunately. Right, so let's go have a look inside the box and see what we think of the sprues. Let's see if I have the footage for it. If I don't, we might be having an awkward chat. Okay, and here we are with the TS-11 Iskra Bis DS, and this, as we say, is by Arma Hobbies. The photo etch parts are really nice in this kit, although I won't be using them because, I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's just that I don't really vibe with photo etch parts. Now, the decals, again, I'm not really going to need to use them, but I think they're really good quality. I can't really say for sure because I don't end up using them, but they look pretty good. The parts themselves are fantastically moulded. I'm really proud of how the decals look. They're amazing. Arma Hobbies did a really, really good job. The panel lines are deep enough to look really nice on a finished kit, but not so deep that they look like absolute trenches. Both parts of the fuselage look fantastic, as do all the other parts of the sprue, including the landing gear, the air intakes, and, well, the landing gear assembly as well, not just the actual landing gear itself. It all looks really good. You can see the cockpit as well doesn't look too bad. Again, 1/72 scale, I'm not too bothered about cockpits, and we'll talk about what I ended up doing by accident for this later. The wings look really, really nice, and I think the wings are really distinctive on the Iskra. They look fantastic. Again, the panel lines just look dead on what I would hope them to be. So yeah, I think these look really, really nice, and the tail looks really good too, and having the tubing on both the wing and the tail assembly without you having to stick them on is a plus, because I despise having to do those. So there we go, the sprues will look really, really nice, and there's not a lot to them. This would be a fantastic kit for even a new starter in the model making world. And with some of the paint schemes, it wouldn't be too hard to do them either, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, the clear parts, I'm kind of shocked by, to be honest. For what I would view as well, they're probably not small now, but we're a relatively newer model assembly kit manufacturer. They look amazing. The different textures for the different parts, so the clear part and the non-clear parts, are fantastic. Honestly, this is probably some of my favourite clear parts I've ever had. I'd probably give these an 8 out of 10, maybe even a 9. They just look so nice. I'm honestly kind of blown away by them. Well, that was the inside of the box, and I guess it's time to get on to the construction. So there are 2 things I want to address before we go and have a look at me doing the construction. I didn't paint the cockpit first because I thought I'd paint it afterwards, because I've done that on others before. But I forgot to paint the inside of the fuselage, so that ended up looking like an absolute mess. And I've also mentioned about the decals before as well, but I only have 1 set, so bearing that in mind throughout the construction. But let's have a look at it. Okay, and here we go with the construction of the Iskra, the TS-11, and this kit was really nice to put together. I started off putting the wings, and that's kind of what I usually do, even though it's normally quite late into the construction that it asks you to do it. I tend to do it quite early just because it's out of the way, it can dry whilst you do the rest of the model. The wings, as I say, are really nicely moulded, and together they look fantastic. I like that it has the pitot or instrument tubes, whatever they are, on the wingtips. I can't quite remember what they are, but I'm glad they're there because I hate sticking them on, and they feel a lot stronger when they're molded as part of kit. I don't know if that's just me, but it definitely feels that way. You have to build the wheel assembly as well, for, you know, when you're having a gear down configuration, which is quite standard. And I did decide that I was going to do this one sort of sitting down, despite the fact that the one I did as a child is a flying model, so they'll look quite nice together. In terms of the fuselage, again, I cut that out and it was time to do the cockpit before I put everything together. And as I say, I did make a massive mistake here, and I'm sorry that a lot of it's off screen. I was having a bad day, clearly. But yeah, I didn't paint my cockpit fully before I put it into the kit, and that was a massive mistake because I think the cockpit doesn't look very good in my model because I didn't paint it beforehand. But on the other side, 1/72 scale cockpits, do they really matter? It's the debate that goes on as long as time itself, so I'm not too upset or bothered by it. But if I had to do this kit again, I definitely would go back and make sure that I did the cockpit properly and fully. I feel like I should have tried to do the photo etch. I didn't even try and do it in this kit, and that was just a stupid decision, to be perfectly honest. I should have at least made an attempt to use photo etch because it does add a lot to the kit. It makes it look a lot more vibrant and alive, but I got really pit off from it, sorry, from my PZL P11A video. So, you know, it is what it is. I'm not too sad about it. As you can see as well, I've cut up a load of paper clips that add weight to the front of the aircraft. It does ask you to put in weight. Most models like this tend to be about 5 grams of weight in the nose. You can use things like fisherman's weight, or you can use filler with any spare things lying around. As I say, I use a lot of paper clips because I just tend to have them. The front of the nose has a lot of space in this kit, and the wheel, the front wheel, doesn't need anything really to attach to, so you're free to pretty much use the entire front of the aircraft. And just due to sort of the sexy 60s design of this aircraft, you have a lot of room to play with to make sure you can get, you know, enough weight in, so it's quite nice in that regard. After I put the cockpit in, it was time to assemble the model sort of to its completion. As you can see there, I've put a lot of tape around it to make sure that it all sticks together nicely, and I don't know if you can see properly, but I'm putting some filler in. I'm also, what I do later on is I do put some of the sprue goo in there as well to try and fill some of the gaps. Ultimately, there was one thing that I forgot to do here that I don't remember if I captured it later on, but I didn't put the engine in. So I had to basically rip the model apart and put that back in, and it did sort of ruin the engine area of the kit. I'm not like super upset that I did it, because, you know, it's better to try and learn to do these things on something that you can replace than to do it on something that you really never can get another version of. You can see there that I'm putting sprue goo on it just to try and soften it out, and in the end it doesn't look horrific, it just doesn't look good, if you get me. Like, you can tell that an amateur has been at work there, and as I say, I am an amateur modeler, so that's completely fine. It doesn't look horrific, it just doesn't look great. I couldn't get the whole aircraft kit apart, so I basically just sort of created a little gap and then pushed it in place and then sealed it back up over the end of it. It was a hack job basically, and that's absolutely fine. I'm here for it. So that was the main bit I needed to do, other than obviously putting the wheels in, or the undercarriage in I should say, which I do sort of towards the end after I've sorted out the actual sort of livery of the kit. Now, in terms of what I've done to the kit, I did undercoat it in Citadel's, is it Corax White, the white undercoat that they have that's sort of an off-white. I then go over it with Revell Aquacolor White, just to sort of make sure it's like a proper vibrant white. I do this in lots of little thin layers. You never want to go in with heavy layers, you'll lose a lot of the detail, but over time it builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and you get a really lovely vibrant white finish. And that's what we managed to achieve on this kit. It did take a long time, I'll be honest with you. White is an absolute pain in the ass to do, and using the Corex white underneath to start with definitely helps me achieve that. But yeah, it's not something that's particularly fun to do, and I don't you guys seem to really enjoy watching me do it. I guess it's quite relaxing to watch them do it, and you could definitely see the difference between when I started off with sort of almost the greyish tones of Corex white, because it's sort of quite a dull off-white, almost like ivory. Now we're getting to the good stuff, which is putting the decals on. So these decals are literally just red lines, and they indicate where you're going to have red filling it and sort of white negative space. I literally have not explained that very well at all, but that's basically how this works. Personally, I feel like the decal should have double lines so that you don't have to paint outside lines. You can almost use it like a colouring book in that regards. But I mean, these are like the decals I could find. I don't know if there are any other decals available. But I think personally, I think someone should like maybe do these with like those extra lines in place, so you literally just paint inside them. I think that would look really, really nice, because these are quite difficult to do. Because the issue I found was once I put the decals on, I was like, oh, do I then need to varnish over the lines? But then if I varnish it, I'm going to have issues with the paint adhering, and then I'll have to like maybe sand some of it to make sure the paint sticks, and I don't want to risk ruining the decals, and then putting masking tape on top as well. Like sometimes you can still lift up some of the gloss. So I basically just made the decision that I was just going to freehand it. Whether or not that was a sensible decision, I literally have no idea. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have, but we are where we are today. I can't really go back and adjust that, and hey, we all need practice with our freehand. The side parts, that like fuselage sides, they were an absolute nightmare and broke several times. The second one I decided to deliberately cut up to try and make it a lot easier, but yeah, I wasn't a fan. I'll be really straight up honest with you guys. I wasn't a fan of it. I think maybe I should have put it on before I put the wings on. Would have been a more sensible thing to do, but that was probably in the instructions, to be fair. That is probably user error, but I just didn't think about doing that. I'm so used to, you know, you put the whole kit together, then you do all the decals, and I think like maybe the decals should come in separate parts so that you can do it once the aircraft has been put together, you know, because it shouldn't limit you in terms of how you want to build it. But again, it's a small industry, it's absolutely fine. They're not bad quality in any regards. They're quite standard for a smaller manufacturer. They come off as one sheet. You have to cut out obviously any bits you don't want or sand off any excess. They're completely serviceable. The actual quality of the decals is fine. I just think that they could just be put up a level, I think. The underside of the aircraft I didn't have decals for, obviously, so I didn't think about wasting my time, if I'm really honest. I felt very frustrated and just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna paint red lines on it. I'll make them look nice, I'll make them look pretty, but I'm not gonna do like the double line thing with the negative space in the middle, because I don't want to like have to keep masking it and unmasking it and fixing it and what have you. So I just made the decision that, you know what, I'm just going to paint some lines on it and it'll look fine. The underside of the model anyway, for my instance, is not going to get really seen anyway, because I mean, it's not like it's going on a mirrored base or even on like a glass shelf. It's probably going to sit in my parents' next to the old one I did as a child, so it's fine. I'm not that fussed about it. If I was like doing this again, I'd obviously buy 2 sets of decals, which looking at them today would probably cost me, I think, about £20 to get them all together, which I'm not a super massive fan of the amount of money you'd have to spend for that, but I've spent that much on decals before. You know, it's not that big a deal, to be perfectly honest. It's just, I feel like it should come as a complete set, because you're building one display aircraft, you know? But it is what it is at the end of the day. Either way, once I started getting the paint on, I thought it started looking really, really cool. Like, I was really excited. It started really coming together. It's so 60s. I just love it so much. There are very few display schemes that get me so excited, but this one I just think is one of the more interesting display schemes, just with the use of the lines, to be honest, because even like the Indian display team, they have a similar sort of style where it's red and white, and they use a lot of angled lines, but I think there's just, it doesn't have that 60s swish that the the Bialo-Czerwone Iskry does, if I'm honest. Like, it's just something else, and I'm so glad I got to do it and immortalize that. Sorry, I keep looking, it's like over there on my shelf. So yeah, I'm really, really happy with this. It turned out okay. The bottom of it, as I say, is a mess. I should have masked the whole thing. I'll be really honest, I just couldn't be bothered. And it is laziness. And yeah, you know what? Sometimes it's okay to be lazy. If you're not building this for a show or a competition, and you just want something to look nice on your shelf, if you don't want to do the underside of the aircraft at all, you do you. You just don't even need to. Don't care what anyone else says. You know, you're doing this model for yourself. You're doing it for fun. You don't need it to look absolutely insanely impeccable. So just, why? You know? And that's sort of the approach I took. I just thought, no one's going to see that underside. It's a very low slung aircraft anyway. It sits very flush to the floor. It's like a faux in that regards. And you know, you might have a peek under and you'll just think, oh, okay, that looks fine. But for me, the important thing was making sure the top looked as nice as it could do. And I think I did okay. There were some of the decals that sort of slipped when I was putting the model down or varnishing it. And that's meant that some of them are slightly out of line. And it is what it is. You know, there's not really a lot I can do at this point. And the rear section of the aircraft, oh my god, that just didn't even have decals on one side because they just broke apart entirely. You can see I'm using a flat brush to get a really, really straight edge without me having to mask it. Considering I didn't mask this at all, I think it ended up looking pretty good. My freehand skills have definitely got a lot better, which you'll see when you see this one next to the original one, because yeah, the original one looks like absolute crap. Next to this. I'm really proud of this, guys. Well, that was the construction, and I'll be honest, I faced a lot of in making this kit. I guess a lot of it was again due to expense. The decals weren't cheap on their own, the kit isn't cheap on their own, and money's tight. So I really didn't want to mess it up. I was also trying to rebuild something that I built when I was a child. As I said before, this model kit is one I built many years ago, and it actually sort of lives on display on top of speakers in my parents' living room, and I wanted to make one that looked a lot better, a lot nicer, that could sit with it underneath. And I think I've done that. There were a lot of times that it actually caused me to make some mistakes, and I think I ended up rushing it. I know I mentioned in one of my older videos that I need to make myself take more time, and we'll discuss that after we've had a look, because I think despite all that, in the end, I got something okay looking, but I don't want to ever just show you guys just the successes. So let's have a look at my TS-11 Iskra in Bialo-Czerwone Iskry colours. Right, okay, I know the paintwork is a mess, guys, don't come for me too hard. I struggled with this, and I've always said I am an average model maker. I am not someone who is like a fantastic painter. I wouldn't class myself as someone who's particularly creative either. And I don't have the steadiest hands in the world, so yeah, I did struggle with this, and I think I should have used a lot more tape, I should have used a lot more patience. I think a lot of what I found hard with this is because they're not pre-cut decals, you have to somehow get them stuck onto the model and gloss them without affecting all the paint that's underneath. So you're either going to be painting on top of gloss to paint all the red on and everything else, which I think is what I should have done. I should have put the decals on, given it a matte layer, used a microfiber cloth to like flatten it down, and then I should have painted over the top of that. In the end, what I did was put all the decals on, freehand all the red paint on it, and go from there. And it's why there aren't sort of equal distribution between it all. I'll be honest, I put a lot of pressure on myself to try and get weekly videos out, and I've sort of taken a little bit of a step back, let myself to do bi-weekly videos so I can try and allow myself more time towards these projects and make them a higher quality. So that is something I'll consider going forward, because, for example, the exhaust of this aircraft is a mess. Like, it does not look good. However, when you look at the aircraft I made 10 years ago, it's a massive improvement. I'm not sad with what I've made. Although I've probably shown what some of my limits are, I know I can do better. Hopefully one day I'll get an airbrush again, and these things are going to be so much easier because I can just cut some masks out and do it, which is what I always wanted to do. Sadly, the airbrush I have, which I have found by the way, although I thought I lost it in moving, it just got really broken in moving instead, so it might as well be lost. But alas, I do have it. But one day I'll maybe go back to that to do things like this. Buy or fly? Quite easily, if it's the decals, I would probably say fly. I'm just going to try and ignore all the things happening in the world right now to try and give my judgment, because I think it's the best way to do it. So in terms of the decals, I personally don't feel like they're complete enough to warrant that price. I think if you can find them for £5 to £10, it may be then worth buying them. However, I personally feel like the manufacturer needs to include the additional underside sections, and then it would be 100% buy. At the moment though, I don't think I can personally recommend them, and I think it's the first time I've ever said fly completely in a video. The kit itself though is fantastic. I think Arma Hobbies did an amazing job. I'd love if they partnered with the decal manufacturer and released an amazing set of decals to do the display team, because holy crap, that would be amazing. But I don't think that's probably going to happen. But I would love that too. Two manufacturers working together, that would be amazing. But yeah, regardless, buy the kit. TS-11 or the Iskra is a beautiful little aircraft. I've seen them in real life in several places, including at Coventry Air Museum, and it's just such a unique aircraft that you don't see in many places. I guess it gets sort of overlooked by the L-29 so much. So yeah, I would thoroughly recommend doing it. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. I had so much fun making this model, even if some of the decals made me want to sleep forever. But it was amazing, and thank you so much for joining me on the live streams building it as well. Holy crap, that was so much fun. I hope to see you in the next video, and I hope you enjoy your day, your evening, your morning, wherever you are, and I'll see you later. Remember to subscribe. Bye! Thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell to be notified of every new video on Mondays. You'll also be able to see me stream live on YouTube. Thanks again, I really appreciate it. Have fun modelling!